A lot of news right now about hacking going on in the federal government and major corporations. For some reason, everyone's saying they're Russian linked and they're ignoring a Chinese backed invasion. Let's bring in Gordon Chang. You can follow him on Twitter at Gordon G. Chang. Gordon, this is China's like absolutely full on trying to invade us digitally and cyber wise, at least, aren't they?
Well, they've been doing that for decades, Larry. And the issue here is we know that this is going on. We know our networks are relatively undefended. Why aren't we putting more effort into cybersecurity? So, the issue, of course, is the Chinese shouldn't be doing this. They're criminals and all the rest of it. But we've left the door open. So at least this is on us.
And just to be clear, there's no such thing as sort of independent rogue hackers in China. If you've got the kind of equipment and technology to be able to hack into American systems, you're backed by the government, aren't you?
Absolutely. First of all, China runs a near total surveillance state. 700 million surveillance cameras. They track 1.69 billion cell phones. And they have the Great Firewall, which is the world's most sophisticated set of internet controls. So we know that any attack that emanates from China has the knowledge and in 99.99% of the cases has the approval of the Communist Party. It is no coincidence that the North Koreans have chosen China to be the primary place where they hack the world. And that means that, for instance, the 2014 attack on Sony Pictures Entertainment, although it was the work of North Koreans, had the complicity of China because those North Korean attacks emanated from Chinese IP addresses. So we have not put the dots together, even though we have all the information to do that. Again, this is on us.
Yeah, this latest security breach was announced by the chief technical officer of a company called Mandiant. They do cybersecurity. They're owned by Google, by the way. So you know Google is reluctant to say anything negative about China. So it's got to be serious. They breached hundreds of corporations as well as government agencies. Does China do this sometimes? And they actually leave traces behind as kind of an intimidation thing to let people know that they are doing it and can do it, just as sort of an intimidation tactic.
My guess is no, but I could easily be wrong on that.
Okay.
China does this because it wants the information, and it tries to cover its tracks. Sometimes they're not very good at doing it. I mean, we're very good at the forensics of this, but I don't think that they are doing this, and purposefully exposing the origins of this.
Secretary of State Anthony Blinken is now going to be meeting with his counterparts in China. This, of course, was delayed with the Chinese balloon fiasco. And preempting his visit, the Chinese authorities are saying that the U.S., let me read this right, they want the U.S. to avoid an illusion of strength. That's very diplomatic, isn't it, right before this meeting?
Yeah, Qin Gong, the foreign minister, actually was on a phone call with Blinken before the State Department formally announced the trip. And Qin Gong said that the United States needs to show respect. Well, I think Blinken should demand that the Chinese show respect. First of all, Qin Gong is not the counterpart for Anthony Blinken. Even though Qin Gong bears the title of foreign minister, he's sort of like a middle to sort of upper level bureaucrat. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken's formal counterpart is Wang Yi, who is Qin Gong's boss. So we really had a minor Chinese bureaucrat, in a sense, telling our Secretary of State to show respect. Blinken actually taking the call from Qin Gong was a sign of American submission to the grandeur of China. This was just terrible policy on the part of the State Department.
Wow, that sounds incredibly insulting. But we keep walking into it. We keep allowing these scenarios to happen.
Yeah, I mean, we do this all the time. And the same thing happens with Lloyd Austin. He talks to China's defense minister, who, by the way, is a Chinese central government official. The Chinese military does not report to the central government, it reports to the Communist Party. Defense minister is not unimportant, but he's not important in the sense that we think of defense secretary. So again, we allow a secretary of defense, a high American official, talk to a middle level Chinese bureaucrat who actually has no say over the Chinese military. I mean, what can you? This is just us again.
Yeah. Gordon, what do you make of the report earlier this week that the U.S. is putting together plans for potential evacuation of Taiwanese nationals?
Well, of American nationals. Yeah,
Oh,
and
excuse me,
and
American
we should
nationals
do
in
that.
Taiwan.
Yeah, we should do that because protection of American citizens, regardless of the diplomatic consequences, should be the highest priority of our government. But on the other hand, I want to hear evacuation plans for Chinese-based American citizens. So why don't we hear that? I mean, if there's going to be a war involving Taiwan, it's not because Nauru is going to attack it. It's going to be China. So we should
Yeah.
try to evacuate Americans from China as well.
But is this just standard operating procedure to make sure that we're prepared just in case, or is some concern that there's something looming, that there's something imminent going on with Taiwan?
I think that it's in a sense both. I mean, it is standard operating procedure to have evacuation plans in place. And we have them for South Korea, and we don't think anything is imminent there. But I do
Okay.
believe that if not imminent, and I probably wouldn't use that word, this is something which is a real possibility, which means that the Biden administration is saying one thing to the American people, and it's saying another, and it's doing another thing behind the scenes. That's not good. You know, the Biden administration, elections have consequences. You know, the president is responsible for foreign policy. So he can do what he wants, even though I may not like it, but he does not have the right to lie to me. And really, that's what's been going on, especially with this spy station in Cuba.
Meanwhile, Elon Musk was just in China a couple of weeks ago, opening a brand new Tesla factory, and Bill Gates, another one of the richest men in the world, recently meeting with Xi Jinping. These are men who would only have their fortunes and only have their wealth because of a free society like America and the Western world. And yet they just can't resist themselves to go and kowtow to these totalitarians because there's some money to be made.
Yeah, and it's even worse than that because those particular totalitarians you're talking about are committing genocide and crimes against humanity. And anything that strengthens the Chinese regime gives it the ability to commit those horrific crimes, which are the worst the world has seen since the Third Reich. So I would like to think that Elon Musk and Jamie Dimon and Bill Gates would have a better sense of morality. But ultimately, what they're doing is legal, which means that it is up to somebody whose name is Joseph Biden, whose address
Mm.
is 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, Northwest Washington, D.C., to prohibit these guys from going there and doing business in China. And the president has the authority to do that under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977, or even better yet, the Trading with the Enemy Act of 1917. This is
Mm.
Biden's responsibility.
But of course, he doesn't, and he won't. President Trump has promised to wean United States manufacturing from China in 5 years. Is that feasible? Can he do it? Have you talked to the president about that?
Yes, it is feasible if you have political will, but you also got to remember it is especially feasible because Xi Jinping is pushing foreign companies out. And so we don't have to exercise as much pull on that as you would think. So the
Hmm.
Chinese would be helping us in this regard.
And finally, you mentioned President Biden. We now know that Congressman Comer, the chairman of oversight, he's pulling all the bank records. He thinks he's going to see up to $30 million funneled to Biden bank accounts, and that includes a lot of money from China. What do you think China's reaction is going to be as this is all exposed?
Well, they're going to deny and they will huff and puff and they will say that this is just McCarthyism. And that's what they've been saying up to now. So I suspect that they'll continue it. But if Representative Comer has the goods, then it really won't matter what the Chinese will say, because then it will be in the hands of the American people, putting pressure on the Congress to one way or another impose those consequences on Joe Biden and his family.
It's not atypical for the Chinese government to work this way with other nations, right? And it's not exclusive to the US or Joe Biden, right?
No, they shovel money into everybody's pockets when they can do so. As a matter of fact, if you look at Canada, Canada is many ways closer to Beijing than it is to Washington. We have
Uh,
a long undefended border with a sort of a pro-communist government in Ottawa. That's a little
wow.
bit of an exaggeration, Larry, but not much.
Gordon Chang, Gordon G. Chang on Twitter. Thanks for joining us, sir. There's more to come on O'Connor tonight.